Hey,
Good morning.
morning. Back again with
How
this
you doing?
30 a.m. record.
Yes, ma'am. You know what it
Man,
is.
honestly, this is great because, well, I mentioned last time that I'm a morning person, but it gets me out of bed. Like, honestly, if we weren't doing this, Joe, I'd be like snoozing till like 7:50 and then getting up for work for 8, like
For all
gives
those
me like
nurses out there, they know sleeping anytime past 6:45 is like a blessing.
I know. And I definitely abuse it, but man, it's nice to get up, start my day, have a coffee, have a nice little chat. I find though, Joe, that like first thing in the morning, I get a little bit off the rails, like listening to the last episode. Like,
Right?
yo, I got attitude in the last episode.
But that's just it. We're no filter nurses with attitude. Actually, the best time to do it.
Yeah, and I find that the more that we're recording, we come out of our shell a little bit more and more, and I think that like the last episode is like a true indication of my like real personality, you know. In the episode about management when we talked like more about like my job and stuff, I think I was a lot like more reserved and kind of like put myself in that management role when you were interviewing me, but
Yeah.
when we're just sitting down and talking about random shit, like I just like to be myself.
I actually think that's such a great segue for what we were planning to talk about today, which is nursing conflicts or conflict resolution. I feel like they're one and the same because we
Yeah.
have a conflict, you usually need to resolve that conflict. Um, and the reason why I think that's just such a great segue is because honestly, when we're nurses, sometimes we have to separate who we are from the workplace that we're in, and we need to look at the bigger picture and who we're caring for, right? And
Right.
like what the goal of the team is. Um, so you have to switch back and forth, right? And I do think as we move forward and kind of grow in this podcast and grow with a community, we'll let a little more f bombs out, and swear a bit more probably because that's just who we are naturally.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Um sorry, I'm just like waking up, guys. I apologize. I'm like really groggy. Um yeah,
Got to
so
get all those
let's
oogies out.
right, let's get into it. Guys, don't forget to share this podcast, follow us on Spotify. You know the drill. Follow us on Instagram. Yeah, let's do it. Um Joe, you know,
Sorry.
I think you're right when you say that we need to separate. You know, as a nurse, I struggle because a lot of it is separating your own ethics, morals, judgments, thoughts, the way you think. Um, when giving patient care, like you may believe that someone, shouldn't be a DNR or whatever the case is. Like I'm kind of like diving in deep here, but you
Hmm.
know, it's like a moral dilemma. It's a moral struggle.
Yeah, and that's the problem with values in general is we all have our own values and our own life experiences, and we all grew up differently in different homes that practice different things. Um, but when you're caring for someone, you kind of have to drop all that. And I don't mean that you can't live out of that place of your values, but you have to be able to accept other values and recognize that we're living in a paradigm. And for those who don't know what a paradigm is, because I didn't know what a paradigm was until a few months ago where I took a sociology course. Paradigm is like our sets of beliefs that we live with, like we might believe in a certain thing just because we grew up that way. But that's a
Yeah,
paradigm. It's not a reality. It's not like a fact or like a truth for everybody.
right.
And that can be super difficult though for a lot of people. And I struggle with that too, in the sense of where I work, I kind of, in a way, and also in not in a way, but I want it to be my second home, somewhere where I can get along with everyone. I
Right.
love like having fun, but I also love like when needed to put my hat down and work and do what's right and get the job done. Um,
Yeah.
And I just like
Well,
love that. Sometimes it leads to conflicts because when everybody gets their shell down, people get like relaxed and they start doing things and things can get a little tricky there.
right. And, Joe, I think you make a valid point. Like, I think as humans, we want to feel accepted and, comfortable and, um, you know, we like thrive to be ourselves in every situation. And, I think that when you work far away from home for an extended amount of time, or if you're traveling for an extended amount of time or whatever, like, you still bring your routines with you and you still like long for this kind of comfort. And I think that
Hmm.
with travel nursing specifically, like, like we've said before, you're submerging yourself in this whole new culture. And, that alone can bring up conflicts. And, just in day to day nursing for people that work a regular job in nursing, it doesn't even have to be nursing, it could be in any job. There's conflict everywhere. Um, But do you think that there's different types of conflict in different types of environments, like work environments, Joe? Like, do you find that maybe in travel nursing there's different conflicts than working in long-term care in the city you live in?
Yeah, I actually do, and at the same time, there are some like similar things. But I think
Mhm.
specifically where I am in traveling, it's kind of like this triangle of you're right, like there's an individual traveling to like a rural part of the world, and they're submersing themselves in the culture, and that's just very stressful, and there's culture shock and
Right.
everything.
Yeah.
And there's working with other nurses who are actually coming from other provinces too. So there's some difference in like training and some difference in like the standards of practice amongst
Yeah.
each province. Now, they're all pretty much the same, but there's just like little differences
Yeah.
um and then there's also the culture of the people and the place that we are. And where we work, there's me working with another nurse who has a whole set of different backgrounds from different province, and
Yeah.
then working with the people who actually live here. And in my experience so far, dying to yourself and like being able to listen and grow, especially to the locals, you learn so much more. And
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah, I do think there's a lot of similarities though as well.
yeah, I think that's a valid point to make, Joe. Like when you have travel nurses, you have staff coming from all over the place. Like I've seen posts on Indeed for like um, California is looking for nurses and they're posting in Alberta. So, like, now I know that's like
Crazy.
different licensing for the states and like it's a whole thing to be able to do that, but nurses work everywhere. And, like, the practice in the states is not the same as it is in Canada, and there's a lot of liability issues and like it's just very different, and then even as Joe's saying that from province to province very different. So when you have these people coming together, not to mention a team that you're just plopped into that you don't really get to build a rapport with prior, like, you know what I mean? Like you don't
Hmm.
you're not maybe always working with the same nurses in a travel position or whatever the case is. And I know that we've like based this on travel nursing right off the bat, but we're going to get into other environments. But these sites, when you have all these different nurses that have all different, not practices, but their standards vary slightly, but enough to notice. And different people coming from different cultures and submerging into a different culture. Like, I mean, there's bound to be conflict. And Joe, conflict, like, I think we all think that like conflict can be like screaming at each other and blah blah blah, but
Hmm.
this like crazy like fighting kind of thing, is like what our mind jumps to. But
Gotcha.
right, but it could be just like a moral internal conflict that you have, where it's like,
Yeah.
someone may be nearing end of life and you're seeing those signs and symptoms, but then the family can't accept that. And you kind of have this like moral dilemma because you want to make the patient comfortable. And like, that's just one little example, but maybe the families push back on meds, and I'm sure every nurse has experienced this, and it's difficult to navigate.
Yeah.
Um, and Joe, I think we should get into maybe some tips on how to navigate conflict. Maybe some of our experiences on like, I don't know, just general conflict. Like, I don't want to get into too many details. Like, obviously,
Hmm.
we want to be confidential and,
Yeah,
still follow standard practice and guidelines and things like that in terms of
of course.
confidentiality and things. But um, what are some, I don't know, I guess, what are some tips that you use to avoid conflict? Or, have you ever found your management to be particularly helpful? Like, this doesn't have to be related to the role you're in now, just in general as a
Yeah.
nurse.
Honestly, I think one of the biggest problems with conflict is the word avoiding conflict. Because I think what we spoke about is wherever you go, there is going to be conflict. And
Mm-hmm.
I really like what you said that people like not to think of conflict as it's a bad thing or yelling or you disagree with someone. But there could be a variety of ways that conflict arises in any kind of workplace. I think of the word conflict as I think of critical thinking. As
Mm-hmm.
in nursing, we're taught that critical thinking doesn't mean to be critical in a negative way. It doesn't mean like I'm gonna be critical to you and like put you down, but it
Yeah.
means um, to be an abstract thinker, think outside of the box, like look at the
Yeah.
whole picture. And I
Yeah.
kind of see conflict in that way as well. Um, it doesn't necessarily mean like a negative thing. Like there's many different kinds of conflicts. And I think the first tip is just to be aware of your values and be able to reflect on where you're coming from. Because if
Yeah.
you can do that, then maybe people love, and I do this, I know everybody does this. We love getting into a situation, and as soon as someone says something, we want to like defend ourselves and say,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, well, this and this and this. But if you can reflect yourself and say, this is the reason why I think this, why is the reason they think that? And instead of saying, but, saying why, or like, can you explain more?
Right. Yeah.
And recognizing someone. And I feel like, tell me if I'm wrong, I feel like if you just do that part, and I've been in situations where I had to like slow the brakes down on a situation. Um, I was in this one situation. I wanted to respond. I wanted to like go right into it, but I was like, Joe, slow the brakes, take a different route. And I started
Yeah.
asking why questions.
Mm-hmm.
And this pretty hasty conflict completely imploded on itself in a very good way. And we were able to talk. We spoke for an hour and we were able to hash our stuff out.
Yeah.
Um, so I feel like when you do that, often it doesn't have to lead
Excuse me.
to like this big blowout that a lot of people think that a
Right.
conflict has to be. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's not about avoiding the conflict, it's about knowing who you are and being able to self-reflect.
Yeah, for sure. I would totally agree with that. I think that's like the best advice is that, and they did touch on this in school, Joe. I remember them, we went through a course where they talked about, nurses eating their young and this sort of like, um,
Oh my gosh, yes.
it was awful,
That
honestly.
is
Like,
that is such a that is
I can't,
such a like
I
going
can't
into
even,
nursing, everyone tells you that you're gonna get eaten and it's gonna be this worst thing ever. And I'm not saying
yeah,
that that's not
but
true. You know
I
what I mean?
can't,
Like I feel
the,
like
f-
eh,
the fact that they like talk about that in school though is like a little, I don't know how I feel about that.
it's
Like,
like your first day on the job and like they're telling you like this is gonna be garbage. This is gonna be the worst
right.
experience of your life. You know,
And
with like your right off the bat. So like someone says anything, you
yeah,
like take it the wrong way and you're like, back off. Like
right. And like
state
this, well,
medication rights.
right, this is it, Joe. It's like, you have these like young, heart-filled students that are like ready to like fight the world. And then you have this teacher and they're like, oh yeah, well, like nurses eat their young and like here's how you can avoid that. And, like, I don't know. I see why they incorporate it and I see why I guess maybe the delivery just wasn't it for me. Like they were very
It's all about the
like
delivery.
yeah, they were just like very negative about it all. And that's not really encouraging to a bunch of students. Like, I understand it's important to have conversation around like difficult topics, and I get that. And I love that and I want to do that, and but oh, I don't know, that really like upset me when I was in school. Like the fact that they're still
Mhm.
carrying it on to this new generation of students. It's like
Yeah.
I don't know, like
And
I don't know.
I will say, like, don't you think that that's a paradigm that, like, who knows that, like, well, let's
Yeah.
say this one nurse, like this one nurse who's a teacher now, we don't know who they are. We don't know what their values and beliefs are. We don't know how they interacted in the workplace. Let's say if they had a bad experience, and then we have this one person telling us, hey, the nurses eat their own, like they're saying all these bad things, but based on their one experience.
Yeah.
If we take that at like face value, she just changed um the careers of like in our class like 30 people because that class was smaller, like they did like different classes, I think.
Yeah.
um but probably hundreds of students, and it's just based on someone's paradigm. Like that's it's not the truth. Like I don't think that's the truth, and that's why I think it's better instead of saying this is how you avoid conflict, or like they have like those like systematic 5 steps to like get through conflict.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, do you think those work? Like, are you a fan of those? Like,
Uh, I don't know. Like, I think it's a good building block as a student because when you're starting off, like, you don't really know what you're getting yourself into, Joe, you know? Like, I can see why they're there and I can see that they have value in guiding people. But at the end of the day, Joe, like, every nursing job is different. Every nursing environment is totally different. Like, look at me, I work essentially alone. You know what I mean? I don't like I have a team and whatever, but like I don't have the same kind of conflict that you do working on the floor. But we're still nurses, both of us. Excuse me. And
and you actually have a really interesting conflict that I'll let you finish, but I do want to touch on some of the conflicts you might have to deal with, like scheduling and all that
yeah.
stuff,
Yeah,
because I
for
think
sure
that
we
that's also a very valid one.
right, and that's just my point is like, when these teachers are saying like nurses eat their young and blah blah blah, they're obviously coming from like a clinical background. Like when I say clinical, I mean like hospital background, like from the floor
Hmm.
or like long-term care, like one-on-one working with other nurses, a team, and they've obviously like had that like traditional conflict that you're thinking of where like one nurse agrees with a med and the other nurse does not, just as an example. But
Yeah.
there's other types of conflict. So like I can see why these 5 steps or whatever the like guidance shit is that they teach us in school, like I get that it's like a building block. And but is that something that I really took out of school? Absolutely not. My mind is in
Hmm.
biology, like all the important stuff, the farm, and I think it's important to touch on, but I also think that if you're going to be a nurse, you need to have those critical thinking skills regardless. So,
Yeah.
no, I don't really
And
I don't know. I guess they're helpful, but do I follow them? Not absolutely not.
I definitely hear you because it's cookie cutter. And the
Mhm.
reality is, whatever workplace you're in, nursing or not, or whatever kind of nursing environment you are in, it's not going to be a cookie cutter situation where, you know,
Yeah.
you can say to someone like, "Hey, like, tell me how you're feeling." Like, sometimes people will just say like, "Screw you," right to your face, and they'll cut you off. Like, it doesn't
Yeah.
always work like that. Like, you can't always follow that plan. But I think um, if you can always ask yourself the question, what is most helpful in this situation? And then further than that, what's most helpful for my patient and resident? Because
Right.
that is why we're all here, is to be able to care and deliver care to people.
Yeah.
And I think the point that you made too was really good, that in school when they're like, oh, nurses eat their young and all this and all that, right off the bat you take it away from like the residents and the patients, and you put it like on each other. And I think if
Yeah.
both nurses in any kind of conflict can say, hey, you know what? What's best for like John White? Like, what's the best plan for this guy?
Yeah.
Then they can come to a common ground, or they might not because they also might see different. So
Yeah.
we're
But
back
Joe,
at square one. Like,
yeah, but I think that that's like what you were saying before of going into a situation or, when you're working, being aware of your own values, morals, being aware of your own opinions and being able to separate that or at least being open to other opinions and beliefs and attitudes, like that is the key to conflict resolution, in my opinion. Like, if you don't have
totally.
that simple building block, like you're going to get nowhere and you're going to end up being that nurse that eats the young. You know what I mean? Like, um, and I hate to use that phrase like after just totally bashing it, but it's true. Like, if you don't have that open mind and can critical think and, see things from other points of view, then you're never going to progress. Not to mention, Joe,
Yeah.
conflict also occurs between nurse and patient, not just between nurse and nurse.
Mm,
We have all had patients that we do not get along with, and that's for whatever reason. Maybe they just don't like you. Maybe they're racist. Maybe they're I
yeah.
don't know. Whatever the case is, it
Hmm.
happens. It's happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to you. Sometimes you
Hmm.
just get that crusty old person that just doesn't like you. And you know what?
So tell me, Leanne, how would you handle how do you handle a situation when you have a conflict with a patient, and how does it affect your care delivery?
Well, I mean, I'm not on the floor anymore, so but I definitely have conflict like within the community and my role now and like managing a team and whatever. But on the floor, Joe, if I'm the only nurse, then I use my team. So, um I guess I should go back. Okay, so if there's conflict and let's say like the patient has expressed that they don't like me, I guess I would kind of ask why and I would try to have a conversation. And in the event that they were like, "Well, you look like my daughter" or something, like it could be anything. And like
Yeah.
this man doesn't want me to give him a bath because I look like his daughter. Like, "Okay, cool, man. I get it. Totally."
Yeah.
You know? Um then I would use my team, but I would try to figure out what the root cause is. Or like maybe I look like a nurse that he had once that was awful. Or like, I don't know, maybe he doesn't like brunettes. Like, I don't know. It could be anything. But his
Or
opinion
maybe
isn't
they're just having a bad
invalid.
day. Yeah.
Exactly. But Joe, at the end of the day, like his opinion is not invalid. It's okay that you don't like me. That's fine. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to care for you? So, yeah, I think I would explore, to, you know, I guess to an extent, provided that they would, give me that feedback. Um, in the event that, we can't resolve or whatever the case is, I would use my team. So maybe there's a healthcare aide that this person really likes, or, maybe the nurse on the other side, maybe we can swap a resident from side to side or whatever the case is. Like, I would really lean on my team. And I felt that that was like the key to meeting the resident needs. Because as you said, Joe, like we're all there for one goal, and it's to care for our residents and, make sure that they're clean and they're not hungry and they're in clean clothes and they're changed and they're healthy and they're moving and all these things. And, you can't do that alone. You need to lean on your team. And yeah, like that would be my number one advice. Like I don't think anyone is 100% perfect at dealing with conflict, and I think that we all kind of figure our way as we go, but that would be like my two tips would be just sit down, have conversation, and then lean on your team.
Mm. And that's at the end of the day, there's no perfect answer for anything. You just have to do the best that you can and like the most helpful. I don't believe in right or wrongs, but like what's
Yeah.
most helpful and what's not helpful.
Right.
Yeah, and I think you just put it wonderful when you said their feelings, like it's valid. Like what they're
Yeah.
saying is valid. I
Even
think a
if it
lot of
hurts
the
your
time, a lot of
feelings.
Exactly, and I think a
Yeah.
lot of the time, when people get upset with patients and stuff, and even sometimes when I get a little annoyed and stuff, I just stop and I think, and in long-term care, you can always think, um, this person just had everything taken away from them. Like they live in this room now with um on like a unit with like 30 or 40, whatever the situation is, other people, and they're away from their family. They couldn't bring their pet. They could only bring a suitcase. They can't have all their books in the room because it's a fire hazard, right? They
Yeah.
can't have friends over because there's visiting hours. Like there's so many limitations. So sometimes when I was working in a long-term care home and I would get annoyed with someone, I would just say, like I would just think about that, and then it opened me up to talk to them, and I wouldn't be going in with like that judgment or bias,
Yeah.
and I'd have a great conversation, and that's super tough too, because actually Jelena is looking to go into this kind of research about family systems therapy, and what it
Yeah.
is just identifying our families and how they affect us in the workplace. And like sometimes, you're having a bad day, you're shit on luck. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like you might have gotten a car accident, you might have lost a family member, your kids might be sick, you might be going through a breakup, whatever it is. And you're bringing that into a place of hurt where the other side of the population, so your patients or residents, they're hurting as well. And it can just create like, so much conflict. And I love your answer where you said, just build conversations and
Yeah.
use your team, use the
Y-
resources, because at the end of the day, we're all team members, right?
Right. And we're all there for one common goal. Joe, I think like what you're getting at here is it really comes down to like self awareness, though. And I think that when you can be self aware and, you know, take that step back and be like, okay, well, why am I getting mad? Or like, why did what Mr. Johnson in room 202 say piss me off? You know? Like it's not always like a personal attack, you know? And I think that
Yes.
it takes a certain skill and it takes time to learn how to, maybe take what someone said and instead of, getting defensive like you mentioned, Joe, and instead of getting defensive, turn around and say, well, why are they feeling this way? Or like,
Yes.
yeah, just ask why. Why do they feel this way? Did something happen last night? Did their bath not go well? Like, just investigate, you know?
Hmm.
But yeah, I think that this like self awareness thing, man, if they taught us more about self awareness and like this kind of shit rather
Meditation.
than, yeah, meditation rather than like, oh, nurses eat their young, be careful. Here's the 5 steps to dealing with conflict in school. Like,
Oh
yo,
my
we'd be way
gosh.
better off. Think about how like well rounded we'd be if we just learned a little bit more about how to deal with our own mental health. you know?
If we could sit for just 5 minutes and like clear our brain, like just be able to
Yeah.
relax, give ourselves like because even in nursing school, it's so busy, it's so hectic. If
Yeah.
it would be so awesome if they could include just in one class, just sit down for 5 minutes, someone lead like a guided meditation. And that might sound like this huge hippie, but I started meditating and it's been like life changing because
Yeah.
you actively, it's almost like a self-care activity because you're giving yourself that time to push everything outside away, and you're saying, I'm spending time with myself right now.
Yeah.
And you
And I
just do that for 5 minutes and you
yeah.
can deal with things better.
And Joe, I think that if more people incorporated this in their life, like regardless of what you do for work, like think about COVID and how stressful that shit was. Like, oh,
Oh, and that's such a good point with conflict, with everyone saying different things. Everyone saying like ivermectin works and but no, it doesn't, or the vaccine's good, or no, the vaccine's bad.
right.
There was so much conflict, and I think that
It
mindset of
clouds your
it,
mind.
it does, and I refuse to get in conversations like that because I just always say like, what's most helpful right now, and it's what's most helpful is never gonna be arguing with someone about anything. To be honest with you, like
Yeah.
there's no winning situation there. But what's most helpful in like in this case? So I got vaccinated. I was working on I had just finished working on a COVID unit and I was still working with geriatric people, and I was like the first 100 people in Ottawa to get vaccinated. I got myself on the VIP list. Um,
Woo.
for me at the time, that was my most helpful decision because I felt like I was doing a justice for the people um, who I was working with. That
Yeah.
said, maybe for someone else, it wasn't getting vaccinated, and that's 100% okay. Like if
Yeah.
that's not like the best thing for you in that moment, like, hey, please, like, don't get vaccinated. Like
Yeah.
it's as easy as that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I agree, Joe.
like there's this, but that's just kind of like an example of like dying to yourself, you know?
Yeah. And again, like even when it comes down to vaccines, like or anything, like your opinion is still valid. Now, when it comes to like vaccines and things like that, like there's, medical journals and shit that maybe back things up and whatever. I'm not going to say like whether one way is right or
I
one
I
way is
I
wrong,
totally get where I hear you.
but, like as a nurse,
But
like
there's good
scientifically,
resources.
when I see someone
Exactly.
wearing gloves as a cashier and then like rubbing her face, like, ma'am, those gloves are not doing you any justice. Just wash your hands. you know?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
Exactly.
that was a conflict for me, Joe. Like all through COVID was like going to the grocery store and having someone like, not even the grocery store, Joe, when you go to Subway and they make your sandwich, they wear the same gloves to check you out. And it's like, the fuck are you doing? Like
Yes.
you're literally touching the cash, like the register, and then you're going back. Some of them don't switch their gloves. Some of them are really good, and they're pulling a bun out of the oven and cutting it open for the next person in line. And I'm like, ma'am, you just touched all that dirty money. Now you're touching my
Yeah.
food. Like,
Like,
uh, internal
and like
conflict.
you don't want to be like that person. Like you're just sitting and you're sweating as they're making your stuff. And you just like
yeah. Yeah.
hold
Oh
it
my
together.
gosh. Anyway, that was like
Honestly, a
my
big conflict.
struggle.
Sorry.
No, it's all
Yeah.
good.
a a big conflict for me at Subway, and like Jelena will laugh because like she knows it's coming. When I ask for tomatoes and you grab the little piece of end of tomato where there's no
yeah.
tomato in it, like go
Yep.
fuck yourself. Like for real,
Right.
like
I
like
know.
like why are
Throw
you
those right
putting
in the
that on my
garbage.
sub? And I always say that. I'm like, excuse me, like no, I don't want that. Like I asked
That's
for
so
tomato, not for
that's
like whatever you put
so
on my
funny.
sub. And I
Uh,
get so passionate about this, Leanne. Like it's really a pet peeve because it happens every single time I go to Subway.
it
And
does, to
yeah,
the point where
oh,
like
it's ridiculous.
sometimes I don't order tomato anymore. Or like they give you the one that has
Get
like the
out of
green
here.
stem in the middle, or it's like still green, and I'm like,
Yeah.
bro, how can you serve that to people?
How in good conscience can you put that on my sub and think that you're doing me a justice? You know?
oh my gosh. Oh,
Sometimes
too
after
funny.
Subway, I don't even want to eat my sub. I'm just so disgusted.
It's so funny. I haven't had Subway in such a long time. You're making me hungry. Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Oh, anyway, totally off topic, as per
yeah,
usual.
but just saying, there's conflicts
Yeah,
everywhere.
yeah,
Yeah,
certainly. Even in day to day life, like it doesn't even have to be at your workplace. But I think that the key, Joe, is just having an open mind. Really. Just having
yeah,
an open mind and listening. Like if you can just sit and listen to someone's side, you may not agree with it, but just give them the couple minutes to explain themselves. Like no one's opinion is wrong. It's their opinion, you know?
yes, yes. I love that you said that because that is such a conflict. Jelena would say to me because we would have friends. We have friends from everywhere, and they would come over and like they know I'm a nurse, and they're saying all these things about like whatever, and help this and help that. And like some of them are like opinions, some of them, like you said, they're just factually like wrong, like they're just like very like inaccurate.
Yeah.
And Jelena would come to me and she said, I can't believe you like kept your cool and like you listened to them and like you were asking them questions about it, like when you clearly know like it's wrong. And I was like, yeah, but I'm never gonna learn from anybody if I'm just gonna cut them down from the little bit of knowledge I know, because I don't know everything.
No, I
Sure, I
mean,
might be a
nobody
nurse, but
does.
I really don't. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I
you gotta
think
be able
that's
to be open and
right.
even
That's
if
such
you
a
don't
good
agree
point.
with someone.
Right. And Joe, I know you wanted to ask like more about my management position and sort of how I deal with conflict and things like that. And I think that, when dealing with clients, especially clients that are paying for like a private service, I mention that because it makes a difference. Um, the key is to just listen. And, whether it's like a client is unhappy with the caregiver I've provided, they're just not a good match. It's fine. It happens in facility. It's really not a big deal. Um, if a client comes to me and like expresses that they're upset or whatever, they have an internal conflict or a conflict with staff or the way something was done or whatever. This person's coming to me and, it's important that I listen and hear. I wasn't there when whatever happened, right? So I need to listen to both sides. If it was more of like, I don't know, an issue where, I don't know, something happened. Nothing's coming to the top of my head right now, but um, something happened between, caregiver and client, then, I would reach out to the caregiver as well and I would, ask them what happened and just sort of, I like to be like very open in communication because I think that that's how we're going to build a good team. We're going to get over these conflicts. Like if you can't sit and have a civil conversation and hear all sides without like talking down to anybody, then you're never going to get
Hmm.
anywhere. Like at the end of the day, like we've said, Joe, our patient or resident or client care is number one,
Yeah.
and the well being of our staff is number two. So, like, not to say that staff come after clients, I'm just trying to say that, like, the main goal of the team is to make sure our clients' needs are met, but it's also very
Yeah.
important that our staff needs are met too. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Those complement each other. Like you have the
right.
goal, which is the which
Yeah.
is like the patient care, but then the well-being of your staff, they fit underneath that. Like they lift
Yeah.
that up.
Right. And when you treat your staff well, they treat their clients well. So it's like this circle, like you say, and I just think that like having an open mind and having conversation and sometimes Joe these conversations are difficult. Sometimes, I have to let people go. And that's tough. But at the end of the day, like
Hmm.
if these staff are not serving our, I guess serving's not the right word, but supporting our clients well, then, that's not a good fit. And I got to figure out why. And maybe there's like shit going on at home and like that's okay. Take a couple weeks,
Yeah.
figure your shit out, come back. Let me know when you're ready. Like I'm flexible, but like I just want you to be open and talk
Hmm.
to me about it. But if you're going to just shut me out, then I can't explore or help you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's actually such a huge conflict in a lot of areas. And recently there was actually a situation where we knew someone was going through something, but this person wasn't reaching out to us and helping us. And
Yeah.
it led to that person actually dropping the ball on like a lot of things. And a lot of things went south. And it's like we understand, but like we keep going and saying, hey, what can we do? Like where can we help you? And
Yeah.
they just want to deal with it on their own and do it, and they were dropping a lot of things and they were over committing, and it got to the point where it's like, sorry, like now you're not trustworthy, right? So
Yeah.
if you're in that situation, guys, and like you need to reach out with someone, like everybody knows life happens.
Yeah,
Like
for sure.
sometimes you can't handle it. The first thing you should always do is say, "Hey, I'm not okay right now."
And I
Don't
think that's
reflect
tough.
beyond that.
No, but I think that's tough for a lot of people, Joe, because, you know, a lot of people don't have a support system like you and I do, and a lot of people don't have the ability to be open. And instead of, maybe talking to someone and coping, they hold it in to cope. And, I used to be one of these people, honestly. And it just like ate me alive. Like I was so angry all the time. I was such an asshole. Like, nobody got time for that. It's okay to say that you need help, you know? And it doesn't even need to be someone that you know that you reach out to. Like it could be, I don't know, a therapist. Man, there's no shame in like
There's
reaching out to
support.
someone.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think that having
Honestly,
those resources too, Joe, is also important when dealing with conflict because you may not be able to see both sides. Even though you've listened, you still may have this like internal struggle of like, well, I just don't get why they blah 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 whatever. Maybe talking
yes,
to like an outsider who's not involved in the situation can help you
exactly.
like view from all angles. I don't know. I'm trying to be
Oh,
very general here because I think that every conflict is very different and the way that it's approached can be very different. Like if I walk into a
mhm.
room and like a resident's like screaming at me, "Get the fuck out of my room. Who do you think you are?" blah 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 blah. Like I'm not going to sit there and talk to them. Like I'm going to slowly back out of the room, you know?
Are you
Come
gonna win that
re
battle? Like, no, you're not.
reapproach. No, it's just
Yes.
like we come back. Maybe they want their breakfast. So, we have their breakfast delivered. They get to eat. Maybe they're not hangry anymore. We come back. Maybe we can resolve. Maybe we can't, but we tried. I was open. I
Yeah.
tried. I just, there's no recipe to like resolving conflict. Really. There's no like perfect recipe. Um, those 5 steps are like guideline. You know, have you
And
ever
that's why
felt that?
the secret, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and that's why the secret, because there is no answer, is
Yeah.
to be self-aware and to like self-reflect and uh be be open. And like I'm saying that, and you mentioned this before too, is like that's not an easy game. Like that's not
No.
easy at all.
No.
Um, and yeah, like a therapist, and I'm very open about it. I don't think I've actually seen a therapist in a while, but I did see a therapist for about 2 years, and during those 2 years, I realized that I'm not right about everything, and like there's a lot of things where like I was wrong.
Yeah.
And they
And
just
that's
helped me
okay.
see that.
Yeah. Um what was I gonna say? Oh, Joe, I just lost my train of thought. God, I hate when that happens.
Oh no.
Oh no. Um, oh, have you ever had like a good encounter with management where they were helpful in like navigating a conflict? Have you ever had to like, I guess, escalate to a manager? Like, are you able to like usually resolve conflict like one on one or like, I don't know, just tell me about like generalized experiences. Like, I don't want any details. I don't want any like, specific. It could be like
For
back
sure.
when you worked in long-term care with COVID. COVID's always a good one because we dealt with so much shit at that time?
Oh, COVID was so much conflict.
Yeah.
You know what? Like one of my old managers, she wrote me a reference letter, and she said that one of my highest qualities is that I was able to deal with conflicts on my own and not result in like having to go to like management. And
Man,
that was
that's
in
a
a
good
long-term care home,
compliment.
and I really appreciated that, and it was because of I learned a lot. I was very young. I was like, well, I guess I still am kind of young, but I was like years old, and I'm like navigating like this team of professionals who
Yeah.
like work their whole lives, and like I had to die to myself, Leanne. I say like I'm 22. I might have a 2 year degree, but these people have like 30 years experience on me, and we just ended up like growing and learning. that was a really, really great environment
Yeah.
for growth. There were some conflicts that um, got a little hasty, but nothing ever like very extreme. There obviously has been, well, I guess not obviously, but there has been some situations where a resolution was not met, and
Yeah.
there was just an ongoing conflict. And
Mhm.
hey, sometimes that's just the way that it is as well. And you just gotta have grit. You gotta have
Yeah.
grit to being self-aware and to be going through something. And you have to ask yourself a question: is this the hill that I want to die on?
Right.
Like, is this something that I'm willing to like continue if it's not getting results? Because that 100% does
Right.
happen.
Yeah,
So
for
in
sure.
terms of management, when it does get to to that point, um, I think I've always had management that like listens very, very well. And like they do the best that they can. I think the reality is sometimes everyone's hands are tied because what the difficult thing about conflict is, it's all subjective and it's
Right.
all value based. So how
Yeah.
can a manager come in and not be biased? And I think that's actually like a really hard like challenge for managers, especially trying to navigate between two people, um, is like who's right or wrong. What I always try to go down to is not if I'm right, but if is this the best action for the person I'm caring for? I always
Right.
take it back that way. Um,
Yeah. And
so
I
so
think
so
that's
yeah,
the
like that's
secret.
a really hard question. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. How about you? Have you ever had good or bad experiences? Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Um, mm, when I worked on the floor, I was a bit more outspoken. Um, and Joe, I think I would deal with things on my own or I would lean on my team. Um, was I always the most professional? Probably not. And that's okay. Like I'm going to admit that. I let sometimes like my attitude get in the way, and that's not professional, but it's in the past and I can recognize that now. But um I think yeah, like for the most part, I think I was good at dealing with conflict, and managing the healthcare aides. When I think about like conflict, I think about like the healthcare aides coming to me with like an issue, and that's sort of just where my mind jumps to. But we were always able to overcome it, and I don't think I've ever really had to go to management for like anything that was like day-to-day conflicts. Now like med errors, things like that, more of like the practice of standards, if those weren't met, those were things that I would like maybe bring up to management. But in terms of like day-to-day conflicts, like I think we had such a good team, and we were able to get through it. And we would involve management if we needed to, but sometimes like we would have a health carry that needed to move floors. Like it just wasn't a good fit for them. And that's fine, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it took like a couple of us nurses to be like, "Man, like you're dragging your feet. Like you don't enjoy life here on this unit." And that's fine. Why don't you try a different unit? Like it's not that we don't like you. That's not what I'm getting at. I'm saying like it just wasn't a good
Hey,
fit for that
sometimes it's
person. And
hard.
you can
Yeah.
tell, you know? Um
Oh, for sure, for sure.
yeah, I think that like
I think you made a good point with like meta errors and standards of practice. Like, and in my opinion, that goes less to like a conflict to like more of like an issue. Like if you're a nurse out there and
yeah.
if you're on like the bench about like if something clearly, like I'm talking clearly factually, like we have standards of practice, they're right there. If you see one of those that are clearly not only like broken, but that it's affecting someone, especially like a resident, that's not as much of a conflict more than like an issue that needs to be like dealt with.
Yeah.
Um, and like you need to, and I think how it always should go is not confront someone as in like yell at them and be like I hate
y-
you, but
Yeah, for
you
sure.
like like
Yeah.
could confront them as in say, hey, like let's grow. We're all team. Sometimes we make mistakes, we don't even realize it,
Yeah.
and then just go from there. Like see how this. Most of the time, people will say, hey, I'm sorry. Like this is what I'll do, and
Yeah.
maybe even sometimes they'll say, well, actually, this is what I was doing. This is why. Then you'll say, oh, never mind. It was all a big misunderstanding,
Yeah.
and you'll
Yeah.
just like learn and grow, right? So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that Joe, like when I say that I was a bit maybe feisty back in the day. Uh, like I wasn't rude to anyone per se, but like sometimes Leanne has a history of just saying what has on her mind and not really processing or thinking about what she's saying. And sometimes things just come out wrong, and I don't like intentionally mean it that way. And then other times, like, it's been good because I can like challenge management, Like it's a
yeah,
blessing and a curse, and I'm working on it, and I've come a long way. But yeah, I
Leanne, I
think.
want to tell a story about you.
Oh God.
Sorry,
Okay.
sorry. Were you gonna
Oh
go on
God.
something?
Okay.
There was this funny time. I forget context was. I can't even say it.
Oh
But
no.
we were in class, and the teacher was asking about this like certain medication, and Leanne, without hesitation, just yelled Advil as
Oh
loud
yeah.
as she
Yeah.
could, and she was so certain that that was like the medication. And the teacher looked at her and she's like, "No," and we were just all sitting there.
Oh my gosh, I remember that. And you like turned to me. You're like, Leanne, it's like, I don't know, ASA or something. It was so
I think it
funny.
was
Oh
aspirin.
my
Yeah,
God. Yeah, but it just came out wrong, like, ugh, this is
but
classic
but that's but
example.
that's the kind of like I
Yeah.
think we spoke about this last episode too. The like impulsive just like shoot your shot kind of mentality, which is a great thing in a lot of ways.
Yeah, but it's
But
also
then
very
there's some
detrimental in others, Joe.
exactly right.
Oh
Advil.
gosh. Oh,
So funny.
oh my goodness. I think
No,
that's
that was a good.
a good light way to end this episode. Guys, if you have any tips on dealing with conflict, anything that we forgot to mention, hit us up on Instagram. Joe, anything you want to add before we close out?
Yeah, guys, just like love yourselves and be able to love others. That's just
Yeah.
it. Like that's the secret to success right there is if you can know yourself and understand who you are as a person, when you go into these difficult situations, you'll be able to handle it a lot better. So I think that's all I have.
Joe the hippie over here, closing it out with some wise words.
Hey, that's what it be sometimes. People
You're
get
not.
surprised when they see me like with my backwards hat and stuff, and I'm like saying all like this hippie stuff, and they're like, "Yo," and
Yeah.
I'm like, "Man, just chill. It's all
Yeah.
good."
Yeah. Yeah. Man, I'm here for it. I love it. I love the meditation advice. I'd like to do like a full episode on, I don't know, like this hippie shit. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about like mental health and meditation and diet, and
Yes,
like let's talk about it all. Why not? Let's do an episode on that.
yes. Hey, we
Anyways,
got
guys.
attitude about everything.
Oh gosh, listen, I got some strong opinions. Okay, I'm just here to share them. So.
Hey, I want to do a full episode on Subway and Tim Hortons. I actually have a lot of things to say about Tim Hortons too. Don't even get me started. Not now.
All right, it's on the list. Oh my
All
goodness.
right, guys.
Thanks for
All right,
listening,
guys.
guys.
Thanks for listening.
Don't forget to share this podcast. Follow us on Spotify, and we'll be back next week with another recording.
Peace.
Bye, guys.